doesn't matter what you're passionate about, just be passionate about something. I thought, actually, and that really has stuck.
Hi, welcome to Paths in the Outdoors. My name's Davey Wright, and we are here for another interview with a cracking guest. His name is Simon Yearsley. He is a Scottish winter climber and alpinist, and we're going to find out a little bit more about him. So Simon, welcome.
Hi there, Davey. How you doing?
Yes, very well. I've been looking forward to this for a while. We're sat here during the Fort William Mountain Festival.
Yeah.
And when I found out you were coming and I was going to make it, I reached out to you to basically just find out your story so that we can share it, because I've met you a couple of times and I know a little bit about you, and it interests me, so I'm hoping that other people are looking forward to this too.
Good.
So just starting off then, how did you get into the outdoors? What's your path into the outdoors?
How did I get into the outdoors? Have we got about 6 hours of tape in here to?
I think we should be okay.
I mean, it's a lovely question to ask, and I think the nice thing, it can lead us kind of anywhere, almost down any path. But I was lucky enough to grow up on the west coast of Cumbria, on the edge of the English Lake District, in Whitehaven, and my parents were and still are very adventurous, and they go off and do daft things. 1968, they bought a camper van and drove to Bulgaria for 5 weeks in middle of the night with two teeny little kids. They've always been into doing things, adventurous stuff. And when they moved to Whitehaven in the very early 60s, they were captivated by the lakes, by the Lake District and by mountains. And they got into a really nice life of lots of hill walking. And they dragged, kicking and screaming, sometimes their two boys with them. And so literally it is one of those stories since a tiny wee age, I've been immersed in mountains. Okay, they've been the English Lake District, but it's still proper mountains. And I think age 5 we went up Great Gable in February or something, and various things like that. So in my growing up, I've always been around mountains and always had a deep love for them, really. And as an avid school child, was reading all sorts of climbing literature and reading all the kind of climbing books and the early Everest expedition books with Bonington and people like that. And through a combination of things, actually, through meeting a guy at school, and called Steve Adderley, who was trying to get into rock climbing, and at the same time finding out that there was a local climbing club down the road. When I was 15, started climbing, started rock climbing. Right. And I always think, I think this Pathways podcast is a great idea, because I'm a great believer that in our lives, and certainly in our climbing lives, there are certain points where things take a different path. And things that you reach a junction and you go this way, and actually it's only retrospective you look back and maybe realise that there was a junction there. But for me, joining what was then called the Wyndham Mountaineering Club, it's now called the West Cumbria Mountaineering Club, was one of those really important little kind of pathway splits. And
that was through a friend you were climbing with, or how did that come about?
It was actually I've been nagging my parents to do more climbing. I went climbing with my dad and his pals a little bit. He was never a great rock climber, but anyway, we went climbing a bit, and I wanted to do more. And they found that there was actually an evening course at the climbing wall in Egremont, Wyndham School in Egremont. And they dropped me off in Egremont, and I was supposed to be being met by somebody we'd go off to this little evening class. But I was actually met by somebody who was in the Wyndham Mountaineering Club, and we went climbing at Buckbarrow in the English Lakes instead. So it was kind of a bit by mistake, but my parents wanted to encourage me into that route, and bless them, they did. And joining that group, I was 15 when I joined that group. They were just a lovely bunch of folk, and people like Bill Pattinson, who's still around now and is still in contact with Bill. People like Bert Jenkins, Alan Dunn, not the climbing Alan Dunn, this is a different climbing Alan Dunn. But just a great bunch of people, and they were really, enthusiastic about a nice kind of gentle level of climbing and a gentle level of mountaineering, and you know, and winter climbing as well. And did lots and lots of climbing with them. And then went to university and went to Sheffield because I wanted to, and you did. But that was 1980. When was that? 81 to 84.
And the climbing scene there was as strong then as it is now?
Yeah, it was, yeah. I was probably a little bit more on the periphery of that scene. But, you know, with some of my friends, Steve Adderley, Pete Moolham, Si Yates, people like that were doing quite a lot of climbing there and doing a little bit of studying, but a lot of climbing and a lot of winter climbing as well. And I told this story when we were looking at we were doing the session for the Fort William Festival, but the book Cold Climbs was actually really, again, when I look back, incredibly influential in my climbing pathway, because in that in the book there's quite a lot of photographs there by Bert Jenkins, who was one of the guys in the Wyndham and the West Cymru Mountaineering Club. Climbing club, and he's a really, really good black and white landscape photographer. In the early days of Keswick Mountain Festival, the Keswick Mountain Festival used to just be a film festival, and I remember him winning the black and white photography award there, and he was just so psyched and so delighted that. And then he was asked by Ken Wilson to start to collect some photographs to go in this new book that's now called Cold Climbs, that they were going to that was going to be published, and he became an instant success in the club overnight. Everybody wanted to go climbing because they wanted to get the photos in the book, and then but you know that in a way speaks to the influence of those books, you know, of classic rock, of hard rock, and then the walks books as well, Wild Walks and Big Walks and Wild Walks. They were really influential books at the time, and they influenced people like me as a stroppy, hubristic teenager to want to get their picture in things. You know.
Well, I think the books still do. There's a lot of people going out there and trying to do them all in one push. Yeah. Interviewed Anna Taylor at Kendal Mountain Festival, and she did the full thing in one go, biking between for Ken Wilson's book. So. And also last night there was a lot
Adele
of chat about that. Adele was talking about it. So they are influential books still now. So even to be there at the beginning, that must have been exciting.
It was cool. It really was. And again, you know, hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? And this is why things like this are really interesting, when we start to piece together what our journeys have been. And I think, by the way, just as an aside, I think as we all get older, there's a natural tendency to do that. But doing that through the lens of our outdoor journey, I think is just really interesting. And I bet there must be lots of times when you're interviewing people where it's single instances or single people or single relationships or, you know, a single day's weather that have influenced their careers. So yeah, those early books, Cold Climbs especially, I got my photograph in Cold Climbs and I was so bloody delighted. It's 6.5 millimeters high is the image of me, but it's me. And again, you know, what does that matter? Well, it matters because it was something when I saw that, when it was published in 1983, I was still a student at the time, and I remember I was actually at home, and I went to Whitehaven Library, and they'd just got a copy of it. I was reading through it. It's like, and I actually then thought, you know what? I'm really enjoying my climbing. I enjoy my climbing on the Grit in Sheffield and the Limestone, and we're going off on a few alpine adventures and making things up as we went off to the Alps. And the whole kind of Snell's Field thing of the 80s was brilliant, and we didn't really, you know, we were way out of our depth in that, but I was really loving that, and I was really enjoying the bits of winter climbing that I was doing. And I thought, you know what, I want to really focus more on winter climbing. And I'm not a particularly good rock climber, you know, I'm a deeply average rock climber, but I found in winter climbing there was just something about the enormity of the days and the fact that you have to be focusing on so many different things all the time during the day. So, you know, it's obviously the whole planning thing beforehand, and now we've got the luxury of weather forecasts, and, you know, it's much easier to think about what those conditions are. But it's the whole enormity of the day, from the conditions on the hill, the weather conditions, getting to there in the first place. You know, how do you get to the base of the route? How do you get to the roadhead? You know, what are you putting in your pack, and how long are you going for? What are you going to do? Let alone the climbing thing. So the whole kind of, I think, enormity of days out on the hills in winter was something that I really, really enjoyed, and actually thought I was, or realised I was quite good at. And then in terms of kind of journey and pathway, there was a really really influential time in, I think 87, 88. We can have little captions that come down in the corner. They say, "No, you daft fool, it was 1993, whatever." But dates are never my great thing. But anyway, I think it was 88. And we were, through the 80s, I spent a large chunk of most Februaries staying at the Akinti bunkhouse at the bottom, where the Ben Nevis Inn now is. The bunkhouse there with some pals from Sheffield. And we were just climbing every day, and we were climbing on the bend and tromping up and down every day to the bend, and driving over or hitching over to the Coe and going climbing there. And we had some, you know, brilliant days ticking all the classics, and taking 120-foot whippers off 0.5 and climbing Tower Ridge in an hour and 3/4, and, you know, zooming around the place. And there was one week there when we were joined at this bunkhouse. There was a bunch of cavers from Leeds University, which is Leeds University Speleological Association, ULSA as it was known. And they were this complete bloody shambolic group of people, quite chaotic in a way. But they kind of gelled as a whole. I think there's about 8 or 9 of them. And the first time I met this group, I was really inspired, because they were bloody useless climbers. They were there trying to become climbers and have a week of climbing. But the weather was actually terrible. It was warm, it was windy, it was horrible. And we spent most of that week sitting in the pub, out bullshitting each other about whose sport was harder. Was it caving or was it winter climbing? Caving or winter climbing? And what they were really interested in as a group was, they weren't just interested in ticking or going down and reaching the end of the existing caves primarily in the Yorkshire Dales. They were interested in diving through that flooded sump, in digging through that boulder choke, and finding where the water went, and finding new cave passage. And that was one of those moments, David. It really was. It was like, wow, that's really exciting. The idea of, oh shit, finding a cave passage that nobody's ever seen before. Nobody, like in the history of creation, has ever seen that cave passage. You know, with mountains, we know where they are. We can plot them on satellites. We can see them. But with caving, there are, you know, when you're exploratory caving, you are finding something. Your eyes are seeing for the first time. They're the first set of eyes in the history of everything, creation, that's ever seen that. And that was like, whoa, quite fancy that.
It's a kind of another level of first ascensions.
It is, absolutely it is. And also, these guys were really good drinkers. They were brilliant smokers. They were really into, their music tastes were fantastic at the time. They had, Talking Heads was one of their main influences. You got to name, a bit like climbing, you got to name all the cave passage that you found, and they had this flat out crawl in the Pennygent extensions that it's called Psycho Crawler. And I thought, I fancy a bit of that. So what happened, and they kept talking, by the way, in that first meet about Malcolm. They kept talking about this guy, Malcolm, who was one of the members of Ulster, who was apparently really good and was a really shit-hot diver. Well, he was crap at diving and very chaotic at cave diving, but was producing some really good results and was really influential in this club. And he wasn't there on that first occasion. And then the next winter, the next February, the same thing happened. All these guys from Ulster were there, as well as Malcolm. And we hit it off straight away. We really did. We had just had such a giggle and a laugh. And he was a crap climber. Well, no, he wasn't a crap climber. His winter skills were not as developed as mine.
Had he climbed before at all?
Yeah, he had. Yeah. And again, his parent, he grew up in North Yorkshire, on the edge of the North York Moors, and had parents who were into the outdoors and walking and fishing and all sorts of things, and had that. You know, what actually, I think for all of us is actually very privileged. You know, and I don't mean that in a financial way. I just mean I feel privileged to have had parents who pushed me towards the outdoors, and I know Malcolm feels the same as well. So So yeah, he'd done various bits of climbing and stuff. He'd been off to Iceland or Greenland or something like that with a school's exploration society type thing. So yeah, he'd done bits. But his main passion was around caving. And what happened then was that I actually stopped climbing for about 3 years and became a caver for about 3 years. And we kind of, I immersed myself literally in that world of Leeds University Caving Club. And it was brilliant. It was, I mean, you know, we found some wonderful bits of passage, and the nice thing about what's very different with caving is you do exploratory caving. You need to do it with a bigger group of people. So if you've got somebody who's going to be diving a sump, you've got to have people to carry all the kit down there. You've got to have the people to carry the ladders and the SRT ropes to line the cave and to equip the cave. So it's almost kind of akin to a siege style expedition climbing. You know, Himalayan climbing would be the only way, or the closest analogy. So you need a big team of people there. And I love that. I thought it was, you know, in climbing we have more of a relationship, a rope, you know, two ends of a rope. Caving was a bigger social scene. And whilst I was a lot older than most of these guys, most of them were students, the whole student scene was great fun as well. And there was a student who I really liked. She was gorgeous and lovely. So I kept trying to get in situations where this young woman called Sarah was. We'd been married for quite a long time now, but so there was that. You know, we talk about pathways and influences, and absolutely included. So the whole kind of link with Leeds and the caving scene was wonderful, and spent about 3 or 4 years not doing a lot of climbing, but doing a lot of caving. And then Malcolm and we were caving a lot with Malcolm, and Malcolm and I decided, you know what, it's getting a bit hard work, this, you know. And I wasn't diving, but Malcolm was doing a lot of diving, and the margins in there, the you know, the implications of getting it wrong are not good. And we were kind of almost wanting to go back into the mountains, right. And so that's gently what we did. And I can't put my finger on any one moment when we decided, let's not be cavers anymore, let's be climbers. It didn't happen like that, but we gently started to do more and more climbing. Some friends then organised a trip to Broad Peak out in the Himalaya, and I remember Malcolm, I said, should we go along to that and see what the crack is? So we went round to this guy's house. He said, come round if you're interested in this Broad Peak trip. And we sat there at the back. There was probably about 3 of us sitting in the back of this room, and there's about 30 people in this room. And we just knew this really was not going to be for us. It was uber organised. I mean, you know, if you want to do that and you want to lead an expedition and get a team of people all over, and it was just like, holy shit, this is way too organised. We want to be a little bit more free and chaotic in how we do this, but we like the idea of going to the Himalaya. And so we kind of gently sidled out the back of the room and closed the door and left them to. They went to Broad Peak. They didn't get up Broad Peak, but they. Yeah. So
why was it that you didn't feel that was the way that you wanted to approach Broad Peak as an example?
Remember early on, I'd read a lot of things like the Chris Bonington books, right. and that you know 1970s siege style climbing, where you've got big organised expedition. I enjoyed reading those. I knew even then that I'd never really wanted to do that kind of big thing. And I also read books by people like Pete Boardman and Joe Tasker, and where there's 2 of them, you know, and they're off and they're climbing, you know, they're climbing Dhaulagiri, and they're climbing all sorts of, you know, amazing routes just with 2 of them. And that's what I was doing in Scotland in winter. I was climbing just 2 of us. And I saw people taking that approach to the greater range out to the Himalayas. And I knew that's what I wanted to do rather than be part of a huge, big thing. I wanted more of that freedom of decision making, that, you know, ability to have a laugh and a giggle and take the piss out of one other person, them take the piss out of you. And, you know, and obviously that has a whole different set of challenges. But I knew I didn't want to be part of a really big, you know, southwest face of Everest style huge expedition, which were hugely successful and influential. And Malcolm was thinking exactly the same, and another friend of ours, Julian, and another friend, Steve, were all kind of thinking the same thing. And we were all also at the same time, we were parallel to all of this in winter, we were started doing more and more winter climbing, and more predominantly coming up to Scotland, and long trips every other weekend from Leeds and Sheffield, coming up to Scotland, and we were loving that small team, not being really on the radar of anything and just going and doing our own thing and starting to put up some new routes as well. So knew we wanted to translate that into, if we were going to go to the Himalayas, we wanted to take that and put that into the Himalayas rather than a big thing. And we started to do new routes in Scotland, and that was really interesting. And I remember when the last Ben Nevis guidebook came out, not the current one, the one before it, the kind of smaller one, and when that came out, Malcolm got a copy, I had a copy, and we're on the phone to each other. What do you think then? Have you seen page 97? What it was? Yeah, it looks good as dead. And on page, there was a picture of Roger Everett on Ben Alder, on the route on Ben Alderwand, on Ben Alder. And what we both noticed was that on this photograph, there's I think it's Roger Everett, yeah, on Alderwand. And again, we can put a caption there if it's not Roger, sorry. But in the background of him, there's loads of ribs and gullies and ribs and gullies and ribs and gullies stretching off for 300-400 metres. And we knew that was the only route that was on that face. So all of those potential other lines, you could see in the photo with that. And so we thought, well, why don't we try and have a look around Ben Alder and scratch around there? And then Malcolm, we got a map and we thought, hold on, there's a south buttress of Garve Corrie here, which is about 250 metre high buttress, north facing, 800 metres, no routes on it. And so we thought, okay, let's walk in there. Yeah. And it's a long way. It's a long way into Ben Alder. And we walked the first time with huge rucksacks. And we wanted to camp up in the corrie underneath this, the south buttress of Garve Corrie. And there was myself and Malcolm. We walked in these huge rucksacks. Took us days and days to walk, not quite, but it took us ages. And beautiful winter conditions, and we walked up into the corrie. And as you're approaching the south buttress of Garve Corrie, there's this plumb vertical, amazing ice line right in the middle of it, and it looks like this boom dagger thing dropping down towards you. And you may be a couple of kilometres away, and you can see this thing appear. And we're like, holy shit, nobody climbed that. You're looking around, and Ben Alder's a very beautiful place, but nobody climbed on this. And we were like, we're going to go and climb that. Look at that, looks fantastic. And we were really getting worried about how steep this thing was. And the closer and closer we got, of course, what we were looking straight onto the buttress, and we were looking at a nice, beautiful vertical line that was actually set at about that angle. and it was this lovely grade 1 snow gully that would just split the buttress, which taught us some lessons in perspective, if not literally in perspective. But we camped under there for a day or so, and we did that route, and we called it Rayburn's Gully because he should have done it. And we were on such a buzz, doing these new routes. And we were writing letters to Andy Nisbet and to Simon Richardson saying, we think we've done these routes, we think there might be first ascents. And we did several other routes on there, and then we went back with Julian, and that was our first kind of our first exposure to the idea of doing new routes in Scotland. And we did quite a few routes on the South Buttress of Garve Corrie, and Andy Nisbet and various other people have gone in since and done loads of others. But there was something there, Davey, about that real excitement of the exploration side of it, both of the physical there in the mountains, but also then afterwards thinking, okay, what do we do about documenting this? How do we make this part of, because we're proud of what we've done. And how do you make sure that we write it up in the right, because we've never done it before. How do you do a new route description? I don't know. Who do you send it to? I don't know. And it was all postage and stamps and letters and stuff then. But it was great fun. It was really good fun. And we suddenly thought, well, actually, if there's new routes to do there's new routes all over the place. And so Malcolm and I, we started to adopt the same approach that we'd had for caving. And in caving, you have to be very methodical about all your research, and where the water goes into a cave and where it comes out, and you dye test things and you map things, and it's a very, and you go back to source material. So actually, we took that approach, that discipline, if you like, which Malcolm is brilliant at, of research, and we applied that to thinking about objectives in new routes in Scotland in winter. And we, when the Northwest Guidebook, again the kind of first Stumpy editions came out, we looked in there. We said, right, tell you what, we'll take a week and we'll read the guidebook, and then we'll speak on the phone and see what we think. And it was hilarious because it's like, what do you think to that route? Yeah, I thought about that, not sure. What about that one? So where is Foinaven then? and bloody hell, that's a long way. But we both hit on the description of Pobble, which is a summer VS on Foinaven, which talks about chimneys and gullies and corners and grooves and north facing and altitude of 800 metres, whatever it was, northeast facing. And so we went and did first winter ascent to Pobble, which is 4 hours worth of conversation in itself as well. But what we enjoyed doing was we found ourselves, so where we are in terms of pathways, I've met somebody who I share a passion and a love with in the mountains. We love the exploration side of things, and that's really, really, it's a lovely thing that we both enjoyed and were quite good at. We're never brilliant, never really top end climbers by any means, but when you combine degree of enthusiasm, relative skill as a climber with all of that kind of researchy stuff, then and the love of doing new things, then it was starting to pay dividends, and we were getting quite a few new routes done, starting to get a little be noticed a bit. Yeah. And then we were starting to think about going out and applying these ideas out to the Himalayas. And we were doing bits in the Alps and a few bits in the Alps in winter, not very successfully. And then 92, we went out to India, and there were 4 of us on this trip. We went out we found a book in Harish Kapadia's Exploring the Himalaya, Exploring the Hidden Himalaya. You open there, and there's a lovely picture, and it talks about this mountain called Yogeshwar in the Garhwal Himalayas around the Gangotri, head of the Ganges. And there's this lovely photo. So there's a photo, and it says, unclimbed summit, and that it had been attempted by a few teams, but this summit was unclimbed. We thought, we'll go and do that. And we were completely ripped off. Our porter, our agent that we used were criminals in my view, but we didn't really know what we were doing, but we had a laugh and we had a giggle, and we freighted tons of kit out there. And now when we go on a trip, it's basically hold all, and that's it. But we had a really good laugh, and we didn't die, which was good. And we made the first ascent to the south face of Yogeshwar, 6,668 metres. We were well chuffed.
I'm sure.
It was quite it wasn't particularly difficult climb. It was objectively quite dangerous. It was a massive adventure, and we had such a giggle.
How long did that trip last?
I think it was about 6 weeks, maybe more, maybe 7. I think 7 weeks. And now when we go away, it's kind of 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks tops. Mm-hmm. Just because the ease of travel and and then I think we went out. We had to get all of our gear out of customs, so we took so much gear that we freighted it out, and then you have to get the gear out of customs, which is about 4 days just to do that in Delhi still. Mm-hmm. We were in Delhi for about a week, and now if we go out on a trip, we're in Delhi for overnight. Right. And just the speed of movement through. But it's a good trip. It was a really, really good trip. And then, multiple other ones. And there was one trip out to the Himalaya when we were on a mountain called Swatchand, attempting a mountain called Swatchand, and I didn't actually go on the climb. I was a bit freaked by the whole thing. Okay.
In what way?
Two reasons. One, there were 3 of us climbing, myself and Malcolm and a good friend Julian Clamp, and the west face of Swatchand, big steep alpine face, beautiful climbing on it. But the rockfall coming down, it was big. You could, in the afternoons, trundle. And we stocked a little camp at the bottom, and it dumped loads of snow and like chest deep snow. And then we sorted this camp out. And all the time I'm thinking, actually, I'm not 100% sure I want to be on this. And I should have been a bit more honest with myself, because the main reason why I didn't want to be there was because my wife Sarah was pregnant with her first child, and no matter what you say, that did subconsciously affect me.
Did you know that at the time?
Yeah, we did, yeah. And it was, and Sarah's, I'll talk about Sarah in a minute, but Sarah was wonderful in the way she gave that permission, kind of formally and emotionally and psychologically as well for me to go and do that. But going out and starting up a 2,000 meter west face of a big Himalayan mountain when you're about to become a dad is never going to be great for the psyche, is it? No matter how much you tell yourself it is. And basically on those trips we were thinking, that's right, on that trip, we didn't get up it. Malcolm and Julie nearly died. Fridge-sized blocks of stone coming through the tent, and they had a narrow escape. And we had a real hassle with our porters. Our liaison officer was the only liaison officer I've ever had who was an unpleasant person, but it was a real hassly trip. And at the end, I remember we were travelling back and we were writing a list of what would a really good Himalayan type journey be. And it would involve something where everybody spoke English. It was a terrible thing, but it'd be like we'd have no communication issues. We would have simple travel arrangements. We would have a gun if it got really bad. We'd have safe objectives. We'd have easy to get to objectives. All the things that have been difficult on this trip. And we started looking around for things that would fulfill all of these. And we thought about Alaska, and we had several different trips out to Alaska.
On that list, the thing that sort of jumped out to me was safe objectives. I think, how do you define safe objectives? Or how, at the time, do you know what that was?
What we knew was that one wasn't safe. Well, actually saying that, it was the west face of Swatchand was climbed by two very talented Canadian guys who climbed it we were climbing it post-monsoon, they climbed it pre-monsoon. So basically they climbed it at a different season. So they chose a different season to go and climb it. Safety and risk is always a really virtually impossible thing to be definitive about. What I knew in that context was the route that we were trying west facing in post-monsoon in clear weather, so it got a lot of sun in the afternoon. It was always going to be risky. And then you try and find the least worst line up it, so the one that's protected from any objective danger, and on that one there weren't many lines. So I think, how do you define it? You build up over the years a depth of knowledge and understanding about what mountains look like, what weather patterns look like, what the shapes of mountains are, and you can apply that to a Himalayan mountain. You can apply it to walking up to Stobcod in Lochen, and looking at where are the objective dangers in that corrie, which actually is quite a complicated corrie. But anyway, but you can do that on a micro level not micro, but on a smaller scale level of a day in climbing in winter in Scotland.
In terms of preparation, though, are you still using the same for choosing an objective and planning for that? How are you using the same kind of principles to lessen that risk?
Yes. Both Malcolm and I think very carefully about the routes that we want to do, and we have got a couple of books, literally black books. It's called The Project,
right?
And this list of things is we just call it The Project, and a couple of times a year we dust off what's on the project and we add things onto the project, and we cross things off because other buggers have done them. But it's quite a detailed list of objectives that we've worked hard to research. We will share with nobody. They are objectives which we are, if they're Scottish winter objectives, for example, they're ones that we know we've got a reasonable chance of doing. So there are all sorts of bits of mountain I know in Scotland in winter with some amazing lines which I'm not a hope in hell of being able to get up those. Not strong enough, not talented, not young enough. There are a whole load of mountains and crags in Scotland that have got dozens of routes on them, dozens of new lines on them that would be great lines. There's some, I showed the photograph at the Fort William Festival last night of a cliff in Scotland. It's 1.5 kilometres long, It has one route on it in winter. It's an altitude of 700 metres. It's a little bit from the road, but it's not too far. And so there are beautiful, beautiful big areas of potential for new routes all over Scotland still. And the ones we've chosen are ones we know we can get up, ones which look really nice, and ones which are probably going to have, in a winter context, have a reasonable chance of being in condition more than once in a blue moon. So, you might get some super esoteric little corner of something that needs 4 days of wet southerlies and then 2.5 days of strong easterlies to free. But those are going to be harder things to realistically find the time to go and climb. But I think overall there've got to be things that inspire. And there's things on our project that inspire me more than Malcolm, or inspire Malcolm more than me. But they're definitely ones we hold together, and it's a shared list between us.
So in terms of if Malcolm had been more inspired to do it, would you would have done it as well, or is that something, or does it need both of you to be 100% into it? We also have we climb with other people as well. Malcolm, especially from a Himalayan perspective, has climbed with other people like Paul Figg and Guy Buckingham, Patricia Duval, and had probably more of success climbing with other people in the Himalayas than he has with me. Okay. But that list of objectives from the Himalayan side, if you like, we've always agreed, we have a very strict understanding that if one of us is going to go and climb something from the project list with somebody else, we have to have that overt conversation. Are you okay if I go and try that new route on Buttress with Neil? Yes, Malcolm, I'm happy. Yeah, or that kind of conversation, and it is an overt conversation, and we know each other well enough after 35 years to be able to have that conversation. Has there ever been a no? Was there ever no?
Yeah, there have. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And it's fully accepted between both of you. Yeah,
and it's like a right of refusal. It's not a kind of try and persuade you. It's actually no, I want to do that with you, mate. Okay, fine. That's a nice way to do it. I mentioned Sarah, my wife. Yes. Sarah was that student that I mentioned before back in Leeds, and Sarah was kind of part of that on the edge of that caving group and the various days, and we got to know each other and fell in love with each other back then. And in terms of the pathway that one has, one's partners, I think there's a book to write in there. There really is. And when I think back, or not think back, even think today and now, how lucky I am to have a partner who gets what I do and shares what I do, but we're not both immersed in the outdoor world. Sarah and I we walk together. Sarah doesn't climb. We run together a bit. And Sarah has other interests in the world that aren't all the same ones. And that works. That kind of little balancing and sharing of each other's worlds really works. And I feel very proud to have somebody who supports me in the way that they do on that journey. And I will never, ever, ever take that for granted either. Never take that for granted. And it's like any relationship and partnership. It's a complicated thing as well, and it doesn't work all the time, But it's an important thing that influences the pathways and the directions that we take.
Yeah, I think a lot of climbers talk about how selfish that the type of climbing that. As you talked earlier, that could be dangerous, and those close calls that might not have been close calls.
And Sarah gets and understands the danger. And I know she doesn't, she works hard to deal with, if I was away winter climbing for the day, or if I'm away on a trip somewhere, she works hard with that, and with our children as well, with Ed and Elle, who again, both, probably more than Sarah, but they're great outdoorsy people now as well. But they get risk as well. They understand risk in the mountains, and they understand risk if they're out on a day skiing on a moor like Ed was, day before yesterday, and they get that and they know and understand that. So I think knowing that one's family around, knowing that my family around me get and understand elements of risk is actually quite comforting and supportive. Never to be taken for granted, but it's an important part of it that allows you then to go and do those journeys.
And I assume that's something that you've brought your kids up with and introduced them to in terms of what that objective risk could be.
Yeah, and our son Ed was he's 21 next week, but when he was 14, 15 was really into downhill mountain biking. You talk about risk, it's like, oh my God, as a dad, it's like, oh shit, don't look. So yeah, they get it. They get that. And that's an important part of it.
It's something do you encourage? And do they climb?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they're both Eleanor and her partner and her partner Emil. They were down at the wall in Ratho last week. Ed, he's here in Fort William doing the. Tell me if I get this right, Ed. He's doing the Adventure Tourism Management degree and loving it. And loving being out on his bike and loving being out on his skis and loving climbing and studying as well. Well, he tells me he's studying. But yeah, they are enjoying that. But one's role as parent, and Sarah and I have talked about this, is to just nudge and guide. It's not to tell. It's not to set out that pathway. It's just to nudge and guide and encourage. Of course, we encourage. And it's to stand back, and that's the hard bit. Standing back
and let them choose their.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've always been. I have a daughter, 12, not interested in the outdoors really. But I've introduced her to things, taking her bouldering down the wall, taking her on hill walks as much as she hated it. But I think my hope is that in the future that it comes back. It might not. But I was never introduced to the outdoors through my family because they just weren't interested. It wasn't something that they were introduced to. So I want to do that for her. To allow her to see, just to get experience, and not just outdoors, just anything really. And so I get the nudge and see where that goes.
And again, linked to that, I think for me, it almost, a little story, which is quite important one. When Sarah and I were on our honeymoon, we honeymooned in Scotland. It's 27 years ago, whatever it was. We need a little date that comes up then to remind me when I'm married. Anyway, we're honeymooning in Scotland. We'd been for a big walk into Loch Arn Basin, and the next day it was pouring down with rain. We wanted to get some wellies, and we went into a shop in Botogarten. It's not there anymore, but there used to be a little fish and tackle welly shop there. And we went in there, and I remember the conversation that we had with the guy. We were buying a pair of wellies, Davey. That was all it was. And the conversation got on to what are you passionate about? And I can't remember how we got any, but basically the guy said, and I remember him saying it, that's right, because I was saying about fishing, how much fishing you doing? Oh, I do fishing, and he was just boof. I said, wow, you're really passionate about that. And he said, oh, it doesn't matter what you're passionate about. It doesn't matter what you're passionate about. Just be passionate about something. I thought, actually, and that really has stuck. And so it doesn't matter whether, from my perspective, whether, Sarah and I's children are into downhill skiing or into, multi-pitch, climbing or anything. It doesn't matter what it is, or avionics or history or whatever. Just as long as you're passionate about something, and it doesn't really matter what it is. Just be passionate about something, anything. Will kind of push you. Will lead you in a. That sounds quite moralistic, that, doesn't it? But do you know what I mean? Yeah.
No,
so
I think
we spend so
right.
much of our lives, our one shot of this life, with the kind of not too bad. That was all right. Yes.
Yeah.
Something in there to be passionate about.
Yeah, I think that's. I think you're right, and I think for me, finding the outdoors is my passion. For various, not anything specifically. I enjoy climbing probably the most, but just being in the outdoors. And I think a lot of people we talk to. I think the thing that now is very evident is the kind of mental health side of it, and having that for ourselves and for our close family.
Yeah.
So you started to talk about Alaska. I think you were...
Why would oh yeah, because basically, you know, this journey into the Himalayas, so the big mountains, beautiful, stunning places, big glaciated terrain, just, you know, stunning place to go and play, really. And what we wanted to do was to try and find easier ways of having that experience without having to travel all the way across the rest of the world, operating in different cultures, which is all part of the excitement of it as well. And part of that list when we came back from Swatchand of what would be a perfect trip was slightly jokey and tongue-in-cheek, but it got us thinking. And before I talk about the Alaska and Canada bit as well, one of the things I think that has helped my journey and path, and I'll put Malcolm in there as well, is our collective ability, our joint ability to reflect and think and process. And so if we have a good trip, why did that work well? And on virtually or certainly on every major climb that we do together, and definitely on every trip, we have a what worked well and a BNT better next time. So that will be range from, you know, make sure you put the washer fluid in the car so you don't have to stop and you can see through the windscreen, through to replan the way we've chosen meals, or rethink the training schedule 6 months ahead. So just that ability to reflect on our activity and on our passion and on the climbing that we're doing and break that down and analyze it as what worked well and what do we need to do better next time has really helped us do more things and get over the fact we're not very good climbers. But and I keep coming back to that because it is a thing. And so Alaska and then Canada in winter were simply born out of how can we get a different type of exciting adventure in some big mountains. And we went out to Alaska. In fact, Malcolm and Paul Figg went out to Alaska first. They went and did a ludicrous new route on the on the east face of Mount Hunter. They were dropped off in a glacial bowl, and the pilot said, "Okay, I've dropped you in here. Don't make me come back for you." Took back off, and they climbed a new route on the east face of Mount Hunter called the Prey, and as they were coming up the east side of the east ridge of Hunter, they were looking down into the East Tokasintna Glacier and were looking at these beautiful big ice lines, these big couloir lines on the south face of Kahiltna Queen. They got up, they summited, they got back down just. They were lauded as superheroes when they got back down after this 10-day epic. They met funky people like Pat Duvall and all sorts of other people. And anyway, a couple of years later, or two trips later, Malcolm and I went out to try these big couloir lines. And sometimes, well, virtually every trip you have, something goes wrong, something breaks, you forget something, you leave something, somebody's ill, a piece of kit doesn't work. There's always something on whether it's a day in the Scottish hills, or sometimes even a day cragging, or a Himalayan expedition. Things always go wrong. Malcolm and I flew out from the UK to Alaska. The flight went perfectly. We got to Anchorage, we got out to Talkeetna. The forecast was great. We went to the pub, we drank too many beers. Paul Roderick stuffed us into a little plane the next morning, flew us out, landed on the East Tokasintna Glacier, which he'd never landed on before, threw us out. We unpacked all of our kit, roped up on this glacier. Amazing, we were 15 minutes, maybe 40 minutes flight actually, from Tokasintna from Talkeetna to the glacier. And then the plane disappears off. And then it's really quiet. And you can't hear anything at all, but you're in this amazing alpine Himalayan environment, and it's taken us 45 minutes to get here, and it's just phenomenal. And there in front of us, half a kilometre away across this glacier, are these amazing lines. And so we thought, best go climb then. And we put the camp up. We kind of spent a day scooting around, looking at these lines. And then we thought, well, nothing for it. Let's go climb it. And we put, I think, 40 gels or 30 gels each in a sack. One skinny rope, or 2 skinny ropes, and that was it. And a little jet boil. And climbed this one route we call it South Face Couloir, because it's on the South Face, it's a big couloir. Moderate climbing, kind of grade 4-ish. Took us 32 hours. Climbed it single push, all the way up, all the way back down. About a 2-hour kip halfway back down and all the way back down. And we're like, okay, so we just done that. How did that happen? And then a storm came in for 2 or 3 days, which was nice because we had a rest. Storm lifted. We thought, best go and climb that other one then. So we went and climbed this other one. That was 40-something hours on the go. These big single push, and it was just like this crazy dream. And we got back down to the tents. We thought, we just climbed another one of those. That was awesome. And then this was in the days of VHF radios, where for us to call Paul Roderick back, we had to get line of sight to an overhead plane. We would radio the overhead plane. They would then radio to Paul Roderick of Talkeetna Air Taxis, who would then come and pick us up. So we're there, completely wiped out and knackered from this 50-odd hours on the go, 40-something hours. And I remember being on the radio, see this plane flying over, and we could see these clouds bubbling on the horizon, thinking, actually, we'll probably do it getting out now. And so we put on this faux American accent. Hello, this is Talkeetna Glacier calling overhead plane. Do you copy? Talkeetna Glacier. And they were like, hi, this is overhead plane calling Talkeetna Glacier. And we read you loud and clear. And we're like, this is like, Talkeetna Glacier calling overhead plane. Could you ask Paul Roderick of TET to come and pick us up, please? Roger, we've just been on the phone to Paul. He'll be with you in 45. 45 minutes later, David, the bloody plane lands, and we're like, and we're still on a climb again. Shove everything into this plane, and we take off. 45 minutes later, we're back in the pub, and it's like, it was one of the surrealist, and we went to this party afterwards. Oh, we're in the plane going back, and Paul said, "How did you get on, guys?" Yeah, good. Just time those 2 awesome lines. And he said, "Do you want to come to a party tonight?" Yeah, fuck it, why not? I went to this guy's 40th birthday party, and I remember just drinking these beers in these sublime birchwoods and all these people around and this big party going. I'm like, what are we doing? How did this work? 4 hours ago, we were still down climbing this route after 50 hours. So why are we talking about that? So pathways and journeys, occasionally you find something just a bit surreal and a bit weird, and there's still so much to do out in Alaska, and it was just going out there and trying it and being part of doing a different thing. We were back 15 days. In 15-day round trip from the UK, we'd gone out to Alaska, climbed 2 major new lines, and flown back again. And nothing broke, nothing went wrong. We didn't lose anything. It was the perfect trip.
An amazing experience.
It was brilliant. It was brilliant. Really, really good fun.
So, obviously, your focus has been first ascents, and it's taken you all over the world. From what else does your life have and amongst it?
It has it had a camper van, a lot of work basically. So it had from about nearly 18 years ago. I've been self-employed. Used to work for a big corporate before then, but didn't enjoy the big corporate world really. So binned that. Set up our own business, running a camper van business. And then 7-8 years ago, we bought a lovely delicatessen in Dunkeld, the Scottish Deli. We've been running that, developing that with our business partners. And yeah, working hard basically is the other thing that it has. So it's a pretty full life with, a full-time home and family. Parents are still around and still seeing them and all the rest of it. They live in Aberfeldy. Trying to run a vaguely successful business and trying to train and trying to be a climber. So pretty full. too full sometimes, but hey, fill it full of shit and it'll all be good. Yeah.
Keep yourself busy.
Can't
be bored.
Yeah.
And obviously very passionate about. You talked about having a passion and following it. Is that?
I think it is, David, and it's easy to sit, sitting on nice comfy chairs with a coffee and chewing the fat, but I am passionate about things, and I can't not be passionate about things, and this October I'm 60, and so I've got a few more years left, and this isn't morbidity or anything, but it's the fact that just be passionate about something and just have the ability to feel that one can be excited. And I don't mean the kind of whoa, the American Black Diamond sponsor, and there's nothing really against Black Diamond, but that whole whoa, yeah, everything's red. It's not that. For me, it's more of an excitement and sometimes a boyish enthusiasm as well, but just being excited by this amazing place that we live in. Yeah.
It sounds like when you talk about the trips, it's from the planning stage right to the execution that you enjoy as well. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the planning and the execution are as interesting part of it. As I say, whether it's a 6-week trip back out to the Garwal, or whether it's Malcolm driving up from his home in North Yorkshire on the Thursday, and then we're going to go climbing on in the Northwest on the Friday. It's how you those climbing, especially in winter. And let's just think about Scottish winter climbing as an example. It's a complicated thing to get right, and you can't just drop it. Well, occasionally you can drop into it and get lucky, like an Alaskan trip comparison, but that will happen once in a lifetime. To do it right and to do it safely, I think I find anyway, that I have to think, plan, review and plan again, and I've got to put that mental effort into it, and I enjoy that, and that then almost speaks to the reward as well, because when you think, actually, I've worked bloody hard at going to the right place, and so many times you'll see in climbing online media, it was really terrible conditions in, I don't know, Stobcrown and Lochen. Well, of course it would be, because it's the minging forecast and whatever, and you've got to be nuts to go there. So that it's a complicated game that we play, and to be able to play it well, so giving yourself the degree of the chance of success through the conditions being right and it being safe, I think in my view, it pays to be thoughtful, mindful, and cognizant of all the different factors that you have to juggle within it. And that's important. For me with it.
Before we started recording, you talked about the importance of your different roles, whether that be an alpinist, Scottish winter climber, whether that be a husband, or a father. How do you balance those three things?
You balance them. I've got in my office at home, on my desk, there's a thing that says, that Simon Yearsley, my aim is to be the best father, the best alpinist, and the best husband that I can be, but not necessarily in that order. And that order always changes, and those priorities. But those are what I try to do, and I'll never be perfect at any of those, but I always try and be the best of those that I can. That I can be, and at any one time, and it is always a juggling act, but that's that again, if I sat on the couch all day and did diddly squat, then that might be easy, but it'd be really boring as hell.
Definitely.
And that I don't know, that can sound like a white male middle class privilege, and I am acutely aware of that. And for me, it isn't a white male middle class privilege. It's the fact that I might be white, I might be male, I might be middle class, and at the moment financially okay-ish, but I've worked really bloody hard to get to that stage and and where I am, and be able and I work hard to juggle all the time those priorities, and I take absolutely nothing for granted in where I am and where I've been able to get to. But it is balancing those different priorities all the time, and trying to do it with, you know, a degree of humility, and trying to do it with a bit of a laugh and a giggle, and trying to do it by being kind to people around me, you know, and yeah, you know, that's what I love. And you know, the other thing is I really enjoy being out in the mountains, and I especially enjoy being out in the mountains in winter. And what what I'd like to talk about now is how that's changed recently.
Yeah, that's something I was on to
Because
go to.
I've built a lifetime of playing in the mountains, and playing in the mountains, especially in winter. And two things have kind of conspired against that. And one was in March 2019. Malcolm and I were climbing on, the conditions in Scotland were bad. We'd met in the lakes. We were just going to go cragging and running, and a bit of planning and a bit of, you know, reviewing of what we're doing. And we were climbing on Shepherd's Crag in the Lake District. And I grew up in Whitehaven, you know, just down the road from there, and would zoom on my little 50cc moped and zoom up to pick up my mate in Keswick and zoom up to Shepherd's Crag and go climb. It's where I did all my early climbing. And there's a route there called Crunchy Frog, which is a hard VS that I've done dozens of times. And we were climbing there, and I set off up Crunchy Frog. The first move is a little step up onto a little slopey ledge. Thump, and my foot slipped off. That ledge is 80 centimetres off the ground. We went back and measured it afterwards. But I just tumbled down the little incline of slopes, hand outstretched, and basically broke my hand, a full dislocation of my hand. My hand basically kind of came off and went down here. So it was a complete dislocated fracture and bits of bone. And anyway, it was bad stuff, and it hurt quite a lot.
Yeah, sounds like it might hurt a little bit. Yeah.
And there was a couple who were on the crag there who were wonderful at helping us in there. They said, "You call the mountain rescue," so you're not bloody calling the rescue. The road's there. So right, but anyway, to cut a long story short, what that has done is it's meant that I'm unable to do that, which for a winter climber is a
pretty critical.
Bit of a so that the wrist, the squeezing, mm-hmm. and the hammer blow, mm-hmm. like that, the wrist cock into a hammer blow into a thing is degrading this part of my wrist massively.
Okay.
And I, over the last 18 months after I'd done it, was back training, was thinking this is all good, but it was giving me a load and loads of drip and hurting like mad. And basically, I went to see various different consultants, and they said, okay, if you keep doing that and training to do that, mm-hmm. then you've probably got a couple of years, 2 to 3 years worth out of your wrist, and then it's goosed. You'll never climb on it. If you keep doing this, so if you rock climb, mm-hmm. you've probably got 8, 9, 10 years left out of it. So 18 months ago, 2 years ago, I took a really difficult decision, and again, talked that through with everybody around me, but to stop my high standard winter climbing, because basically I couldn't train and climb. I couldn't train to be able to climb to the standard I wanted to get through all these lists in the project, and I had to decide what am I going to do here. And what I decided to do was kind of reinvent myself as a rock climber. And I've never, as a rock climber, I've never consistently climbed E3. I've never consistently climbed Sport 7A. I've not actually climbed Sport 7A, but I've climbed 6E pluses, red pointing, and I've climbed the occasional E3, but I'm not an E3 leader. I'd never say that. And so I decided, right, I'm going to in terms of change of path, boomf, this is handbrake turn to the left, and my path changed because I wasn't going to be able to operate at that high standard in winter climbing, Scottish winter climbing as I had, and so I was going to reinvent myself as a rock climber.
So how was it coming to terms with that?
Really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. I've got a big spider diagram which I should hold up in front of the camera, which describes all of those different pulls and different influences on that decision, and looks at where are the what's the positive side of I've never been able to say I climb E3 and I can on-site E3s. I've never been able to say I can on-site 7As, let alone red point them. So there are some positives there on what that new journey, but
So setting new challenges.
Absolutely, and keeping, I bought a book, the Scotland with One Axe.
Okay.
So the all of the brilliant days out in the hills you can have in winter with with one axe. That's fine. There's whole worlds out there, but not the high standard new routing that we were doing before. But still in that project, the book, there's a chapter called Dotage. So all of the things that Malcolm and I are going to climb when we get really old buggers and we can't walk very far and our hips are gone and let alone our ability to pull up on Tech 8 moves. So we've got a nice list there of, there's still a lot of objectives on there that we're going to do as we get old. And that was always our plan, to be adjusting what's in the project and what we're doing in our new climbs as our climbing ability gently descends. And then in August 2020, Malcolm was staying with Sarah and I at our home in Highland, Perthshire, and we'd had a day out. We'd actually been, we were up, Malcolm was up for a couple of days, 3 or 4 days. We were planning a trip out to Afghanistan, which wouldn't have happened anyway because of certain things happening in Afghanistan and pandemics. But anyway, it was our next trip out to the Hindu Kush to have a look at a climb that Pat Devol has failed on a couple of times. The line's now been climbed, but anyway, we were excited about this idea of planning another trip out to the Afghanistan that we'd never been to before. And as part of that, we had a day's cragging on the sea cliffs just north of Arbroath, and then we had a brilliant day out in the Gorms, just packed light sacks and ran in, did a big running circuit, and solid up Afterthought Arete, and then did Savage Slip and zoomed up there, and we're running back down, and just one of those brilliant days, Davey, on lovely, beautiful day in beautiful conditions, and we drank quite a lot of tequila that night. We were pathway right here. We're starting to explore tequila. As a little aside, before I come back to this, the thing that Malcolm and I have, by the way, is lots of interests outside climbing. Right. God forbid that you spend your time climbing with somebody who's only interested in climbing. How boring would that be? God, So we were exploring this world of tequila, starting to explore it. And the following morning, I had actually had to go into Perth to pick up some bread for our deli, and got a very panicked, scared phone call from Sarah to say that Malcolm had collapsed, and basically Malcolm had a devastating and life-changing stroke. Sarah had woken up and found Malcolm stumbling around outside his room in the corridor, lying on the floor actually, and Sarah very quickly realised through some very basic looking at the fact that his face had drooped slightly. His arm he couldn't use his left arm. His left leg was goosed as well. His speech had gone, and he'd fairly obviously had it's quite hard to talk about it. Had a stroke. And Sarah did an absolutely amazing job of ringing for an ambulance. And 45 minutes later, we were helping bundle Malcolm into the back of an ambulance on his way over to Nine Wells. to see your lifelong friend lying on the floor in your family home in the medical state that he was in.
I don't think there's words for that, is there?
It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Devastating.
Absolutely devastating. And Malcolm had a very serious stroke. Nine Wells looked after him brilliantly. He had a full craniotomy. So basically they took off this side of his skull. I thought they were going to take a little bit. No, piece of size of your hand gets.
Wow, okay.
So they took off this part of his skull to enable the brain to swell. Malcolm's partner Donna, we had the phone call you never want to have with Donna. Donna was incredible, and her friends they live in North Yorkshire. Donna came up and stayed with us for 2 weeks whilst Malcolm was in Nine Wells. Donna chose not to tell people for that 2 weeks. Obviously, very close family. And then when Malcolm survived, and he only survived the operation skill of the surgeons there and the luck of the roll of the dice. And we talk about pathways. We talk about that being a little thing. Those things just pale into insignificance when something like a completely and utterly out of the blue stroke happened. Malcolm had no pre-existing conditions, had no, he was one of the fittest alpinists that I know. And 54 years old, and just bang, there you go. And a roll of the dice, and that's what it is. And that was August 2020, and Malcolm's recovery has been slow and steady. And the problem and the cruel thing with strokes is it's impossible to know what's the prognosis. Who knows? Yeah. And at the moment, Malcolm is he can't use his left arm. He can't use his left leg kind of fully independently. He can walk now with a stick, and he's lost part of the kind of lower quadrant, left side of his vision. But he's still Malcolm, and Malcolm has always had this amazing mind. He's a clinical psychologist by trade, and a very successful one as well. His ability to think and formulate words, think and formulate ideas, think and formulate emotion, talk about all of those things is stunning, and always has been. And that's part of the reason why I love him as I do. And the stroke has just ripped all that apart, jumbled it all up, but the bits that are still there are the bits that really matter. And his mobility is hugely compromised. We will never climb again together. Malcolm has a list of objectives, the next one of which is walking up a hill called Black Hambledon on the North York Moors. We've already ticked a couple of the other ones, so he's got mobility. His aim is to walk up Helvellyn. That's going to be tricky, but through a combination of an outdoor trike that he has and people help him, we're going to get him to the top of Helvellyn. We're not going to carry him there either. He's going to get there on his own bloody 2 feet. And we have the idea of doing the Central Gully on Ben Louis, because you can basically drive to the bottom of it, and it might be next winter, it might be the winter afterwards. So we've gone from a climbing partnership with Malcolm. My journey with a climbing partnership with Malcolm has changed from an amazing, influential caver that shaped my journey in climbing, and has gone then through a really productive partnership of new routes all over the place. And then, and the Himalayan side as well, and the greater ranges, all underpinned by this project, this book, this list. And it's taken this completely left field turn, but the partnership's still there, and the direction that we're travelling is, albeit different, it is still a direction of trying to review and learn and understand what we're doing, and
using
trying
the
to
same
set
concept.
objectives, and okay, the next thing in the project is now walking up Helvellyn, and then after that the biggie of the Central Gully on Ben Louis, and who knows, we'll get there with them.
So work towards it. I think for me, seeing that happen kind of in real time from a distance, obviously through social media, I think because it was a lot shared. Because are you still able to donate to
Absolutely.
to support it? Because the climate community did, or the community, maybe not just the climate, supported financially his recovery. So
I'm going to do a plug for that now.
Yes, go
it's
for
called
it.
Move Mountains for Malcolm. It's a GoFundMe page. Or is it Just Giving? Can't remember which. Anyway, Move Mountains for Malcolm.
I'll put a link in the show notes.
It's the reason why we need that money there to support Malcolm is because the physio that Malcolm has, as a stroke survivor, most of the NHS provided stroke support is geared at people a lot older and a lot less physically active than Malcolm. It's not geared at 54-year-old world-class athletes, world-class Himalayan alpinists. And so the physio support that Malcolm needs is brilliant, and people like Anna and who is physio are doing a superb job helping and supporting that, and the other physios as well. But that is expensive, and it needs a lot of money in there to do it. So it is a direct play to try and support that.
Yeah, as I said, I'll put the link in the show notes, and we'll attach it all and hook it all up so we can get it back up and visibility of it.
That'd be good. And if I may as well on that as well, the Malcolm and I have also been lucky enough since I think 2012 to have a really nice relationship with Montaigne, and Malcolm and I actually, if you look back at old pictures of Malcolm and I climbing 1985, 86, we were wearing some of the early Montaigne bright red Pertex and Pile jackets because we loved them and thought they were brilliant. We've now got a formal relationship. We're both supported by Montaigne, and Montaigne have been really, and it's not it's not a big professional thing by any means, but we work with them and they work with us, and they're great at supporting us, and they've been really, really good as well at supporting Malcolm through this, and supporting both of us over the years as well. And things like that do matter, and they do help one's ability to progress along whatever path one wants to. So it's been good of them with that.
I think if in any sort of journey you need that support, and to have it from a name such as Montaigne is good for him and his future, and obviously for yourself. I think there's a couple of things I want to touch on, because I'm taking a lot of your time. Obviously last night there was you did the talk, and Malcolm was on stage and gave his talk. And I managed to crudely record it. I should have been a wee bit more prepared, if I'm honest, but I recorded it because and it blew me away, if I'm honest, because I didn't know what to expect. We talked before about you were preparing for it and things like that, as obviously we talked about preparation previously. So I'm going to slot it in here, and hopefully the content comes across okay. But for me, it was moving for me, and I know when it finished, it was very moving for both of you, and you could see that on the night, and I think it was absolutely brilliant. So I'll let you watch it. It's there, and listen to it.
Climb's classic. Only two people still up, me and Simon. I'm still up faffing around trying to decide what to put in my rucksack, and Simon's still up because he knows he's going to have to shepherd this rabble on and off the bed, so he's checking the guidebook one more time. Simon, have you got a couple of minutes? I've got a couple of questions to ask you. How do I put these things on my boots? I've got another question. Will it be snowing on top of the bed tomorrow? I took 3 things from those early Akinti meets. Firstly, a lifelong friendship with my dear friend Simon. Secondly, a fascination with Scottish winter climbing. And thirdly, a copy of Cold Climbs. I don't know whose copy of Cold Climbs it was, but I took it away anyway. It was by no means my first climbing book. Since boyhood, I'd been fascinated by books about all kinds of adventure, caving, polar, whatever sort of adventure. But my favourite sort of adventure books had been books about climbing big icy mountains. So I took Cold Climbs away and pored over it at home, trying to extract maximum value from it. The first thing I say about Cold Climbs will come as a bit of a surprise to you because I'm here talking about Cold Climbs. As I started to read, the first thing I noticed about it was I wasn't enjoying the experience of reading it. The experience was too immersive. The superb, stark black and white photography and excellent writing evoked the experience of being high on Loch Nagar late on a December afternoon, and even though I was sitting in my warm house, I'd feel a shiver of fear and a shiver of cold. So I'd close the book and move on. The second thing I noticed about it was that it was about climbs in Scotland, Wales, England and Ireland. Mountains in those countries that I might have a chance to actually get to. This was in stark contrast to the other books I'd been reading, where it took till the end of the second chapter before the team had acquired enough funding to set off on their expedition. In these other books, the climbers were doing their climbing under beautiful blue skies, wearing fancy kit, whereas in Cold Climbs, people were climbing in bad weather under cloudy skies, wearing woolly jumpers and dachsteins and leather boots, and it all seemed a lot more accessible to somebody working as a nursing assistant in Leeds. I was surprised and inspired to discover that there was a beautiful book with dozens of snow and ice climbs in the British Isles that were deemed worthy of being in this beautiful coffee table book. Just before we move on, I just need to point out that on the photograph before, can we go back one? That's not an oxygen bottle over my shoulder. For the avoidance of doubt, Simon and I have never used supplementary oxygen on any of our climbs. Or indeed have we used supplementary oxygen on any of our climbing in the Himalaya. I'd like to say that I've never used supplementary oxygen, but when I had my last neurosurgery, I was aghast to find when I woke up that I'd been put on oxygen. Supplementary oxygen. When I asked the nurse how much I was on, he said I was on 4 litres an hour, which is a disgracefully profligate amount of oxygen to be using at sea level. But back to Cold Climbs. Even though these climbs look to be accessible to me, I perceived that it was a tough world. The Cold Climbs describes a tough world, the world of early starts, of long days, of hard climbs and foul weather. And I wondered whether I'd be tough enough. This photograph is Tom Patey. The caption reads, "Tom Patey totally clapped out below the tower, the result of inadequate clothing." I knew Tom Patey was a Royal Marine and a prodigious winter climber, so far tougher than me. So I thought it was likely that there might eventually be a photograph of me somewhere saying, "Malcolm Bass totally clapped out below the tower, the result of inadequate toughness." A story came down from the frozen north. A story came down from the frozen north of climbing on Ben Varn, of ice-encrusted cliffs, of classic gullies, and fine days. That's the opening chapter, the opening sentence from the Cold Climbs chapter on Ben Varn. What a brilliant first few lines, first few words. A story came down from the frozen north. That clause drew me into the chapter on Ben Varn. It was a mountain I hadn't heard of, but I soon realised it was a mountain I ought to spend more time getting to know. So a story came down from the frozen north. Further on in the chapter it says, despite early reports of massive potential in the corridors of Ben Varn, development has been slow, as it has been other great winter cliffs of the northwest. Its vital statistic, 4 great corridors and 2 miles of uninterrupted cliff up to 1,000 foot high, should have attracted a blizzard of activity. It's never happened. So not only was it a magnificent looking mountain, there also seemed to be a lot of potential. The words massive potential, a lot of potential for the kind of exploratory climbing new routes and breaking new ground that Simon and I were interested in. So we looked further into this chapter of, so Cold Climbs is more generous yet than that. This photograph isn't Cold Climbs. It says, March Hare's Gully, flanked on the left by Alice's Buttress, on the right by an unclimbed face. March Hare's Gully, flanked on the left by Alice's Buttress, on the right by an unclimbed face. By an unclimbed face, what a gift. That photograph sent Simon and I into a frenzy of excitement. This was exactly what we were looking for, an unclimbed face on a big mountain. Cold Climbs is a lot of things, but what it isn't, it's not a guidebook. So Cold Climbs was not strictly accurate at that point. There were 2 routes on that buttress. There was the Adventures of Toad, which meandered up the left-hand side, and Harlequin rib up the right-hand side. In Simon and I's view, it was those routes were not direct. What we want to do was that. Straight up the buttress. It was an exciting idea, but a daunting one. We knew the buttress to be between 300 and 400 metres high, which is long for a Scottish winter climb. We also had no idea how hard the climbing would be. The gullies of Ben Varn are a completely different character to the open faces, so they didn't offer us any indication of how hard it would be. But in a nearby corridor, in that corridor along Corridor Farmer, there's a route called Der Riesenwand, which climbs an open face like this. And Der Riesenwand is a grade 7 climb. And that caused us some consternation, because at that time Simon and I had never climbed a grade 7. We climbed a couple of 6s, but never a grade 7. So we were now looking at the prospect of 300 to 400 metres of winter climbing up terrain harder than we'd ever climbed before, harder than we thought we were capable of climbing. So we looked to Cold Climbs for some words of reassurance, and this is what Cold Climbs says about Der Riesenwand. The most beautiful route on Ben Varn is Der Riesenwand, the first and only penetration summer or winter of the colossal evil face of Corridor Farmer. It is not technically extreme, but surely nothing surpassing it for intimidating exposure. As you hand traverse on axis past the last bulge hanging over the abyss, try speaking and watch it fall free for 800 foot to the base of the cliff. All this on limited protection, suspect belays and a bivouac on the first and only ascent, making this a route not to be undertaken lightly or ever forgotten. So now we have the prospect of a 300 to 400 metre route harder than anything we'd ever, on harder ground than anything we'd ever climbed before, on suspect belays and dubious protection and unremitting exposure. But nothing daunted, or actually a little bit daunted, we went to the quarry in January 2004 after a long cold spell had frozen the highlands deeply, and then the hills had been blanketed by snow, and we managed to start the climb right at the very toe of the buttress. We found this groove going up from the toe of the buttress and started climbing up it. It was superb, magnificent climbing with positive flakes and really well-frozen turf and good foot ledges and deep cracks. So the talk of dubious protection was proved unfounded. We got good gear and good belays, and the climbing was just a sheer joy. Very positive. And for 6 pitches, it went on up beautiful, really positive climbing. During the first 6 pitches, we were enjoying ourselves so much, and we had the sense that we're actually getting up this thing that project we've been dreaming about for months. We've actually been getting up it, and the climbing was so good. We just stopped and started whooping with joy and delight, and in the enclosed corrie of Corrina Point, our whoops echoed round the corrie, whooping of sheer joy. Then we carried on for a couple more pitches of beautiful positive climbing. And we were pleased that each time we came to a barrier wall, there was a fault or chimney or groove directly above us, which enabled us to keep taking a straight line up the face without having to have long meandering traverses. But all good things come to an end. And it came to an end at this pitch, on pitch 7, at this horrible slab. Now this will be a delightful pitch in summer on rock boots, on the rough sandstone. In winter it looked horrible. Rounded sandstone covered in a layer of powder snow. I set off up it and precariously wobbled my way a few metres up it, noticing and found very little protection. So it was very precarious. I kept wobbling my way up until I found a hairline crack into which I could get a blade peg. I hammered the blade peg in and took a moment to collect my thoughts. Consciously I thought I could lower off from here and go back down to the traverse ledge below this pitch and then try and outflank the pitch by a long traverse. And my conscious thought was, that would be a terrible shame. The line so far had been delightfully straight, just exactly what we'd set off to do, and it would be such a waste of our great opportunity to make a horrible, ugly traverse out to the left. That's what I was thinking consciously, but unconsciously I was influenced by the behavioural models of cold climbs. In cold climbs, the leader doesn't sketch around for a few minutes, then lower off, and then make a long, ugly traverse to get round the crux pitch. In cold climbs, the climbers just press on through all kinds of difficulties. So influenced by the modelling of cold climbs, I pressed on. And as I pressed on, as is often with the way we're pressing on, I was rewarded with patches of thicker turf and better footholds, and also more hairline cracks, which I managed to put very small wires. And I kept pressing on, and eventually the slab ran into the crest of the buttress. And on the crest of the buttress, the climbing once again changed back to the joyous, positive climbing we've been having further down. And it was in a stupendous position, because now we're on the crest of the buttress, we were looking down into Mad Hatter's Gully. So we're looking down into the Gulf of Mad Hatter's Gully, the great chasm of Mad Hatter's Gully. And we proceeded upwards, enjoying the until it gradually started to grow gloomy. As it started to grow gloomy, I started to get anxious. Human beings are not long away from being, not many generations from being small, defenceless prey creatures. And when it starts getting dark, we like to get somewhere warm, safe and protected. We were not somewhere warm, safe and protected. We were several hundred metres up a steep buttress in the northwest Highlands of Scotland, so a bit of anxiety could be expected. As I got anxious, I started trying to rush, hoping to get to the top of the cliff before full darkness fell. And as always with this way, I was always trying to rush, it got counterproductive. I slowed down, and then eventually I realised there was no way we were going to make it to the top of the buttress before it got completely dark. Full dark came on, and as full dark came on, we put on our head torches and put on our big belay jackets and our big mitts and just slowed down. And once we realised we weren't going to make it to the top of the buttress, once we'd accepted that we were in for a night shift, we just settled into it, and started climbing in a disciplined way, slowly and more disciplined, pitch by pitch, up more delightful, positive climbing. All we needed to do from there was, we took responsibility for making sure that both of us were adequately hydrated and adequately hydrated and adequately fed. So before each of us was set off to leave, the other would cram a handful of squashed up jelly babies into their mouth. And it kept on going. The climb kept on going. Each rock tier we came to, we found a groove or a corner or a chimney that would take us directly up it, so we kept moving directly up the cliff. As we got nearer the top of the cliff, a big moon came out, and suddenly we saw that we were only two rock tiers from the plateau. And Simon led through those 2 rock tiers, a direct line straight through the last 2 rock tiers, in keeping with the direct line we'd taken through the rest of the route. And we emerged onto the sunlit plateau, the moonlit plateau. Onto the moonlit plateau, after 370 metres of climbing, we were absolutely delighted. We were euphoric. We'd done exactly what we set out to do. We created a direct line up the unclimbed wall. We were super chuffed. We climbed a climb that was not only inspired by coal climbs, but we hoped worthy of coal climbs too. So thank you, coal climbs. Thank you for luring us into your icy world. And thank you for enticing us to Ben Varn. And thank you even more for shining a light onto that magnificent unclimbed wall on which Simon and I have spent 3 memorable days and had the privilege of creating 3 long new routes up that unclimbed wall.
So, as we watch that, I'm keen to know about the project book and all the projects that are not done. Where are they going to live now?
I'm not telling you.
No.
No, we've actually we've given a couple of them away already. We've given a couple of Himalayan objectives away, which is cool. We're debating what to do with the list of stuff in that project. I think what we'll probably do is we will talk to people that we know, and it's a physical list. It's not hundreds, but there's some pretty good stuff on there.
Interesting stuff.
And some pretty interesting things. I think we will still just take our time Malcolm and I will take our time to kind of cogitate on what we do with that. I think we'll probably end up just giving those out. Okay. That sounds very bad, giving those out, but you know what I mean. You know, there's a few people who I know will be really excited by that idea of doing that. I actually bounced an idea off a lovely friend of ours, Kev Shields, who will give it to you straight no matter what.
Yeah.
And I said to Kev a few months ago, I said, Kev, what do you think about the idea of if we actually auctioned off some of these things in the okay, so if you want a awesome objective, maybe in the kind of grade 4, grade 5, mixed route, how much would you be prepared to donate to Move Mountains for Malcolm? For that, or if you wanted top end 8.8 in gnarly, that'll only go in some very specific conditions, what would you prepare? And he was like, "Hi, fuck it, I go do that." Yeah.
I can imagine Kev saying that, yeah.
So it might range from we'll sell them, which I don't think, or it might, I don't know what we'll do with it. It's certainly not going to stay a closed book because it shouldn't.
And I suppose on the back of that, and I have a good friend at Montaigne, who we both know, Wim Stevenson. And I reached out to him, and as he knows you, I thought, what question would you ask Simon?
Right.
And I won't tell you the first question he came up with, but he was keen, and it sort of struck a chord there with the projects book, was what about the mentorship that you and Malcolm hold a lot of experience, competence. How do you see that experience being, or how can you give that to the next generation, I suppose, of first ascensionists, alpinists?
That's a good question. Oh, Wim, you bugger! I didn't know you were going to ask that. Right. Okay, a couple of thoughts on that. Malcolm, more than me actually, but Malcolm has been very active in the Alpine Club. Malcolm was vice president of the Alpine Club for a couple of years. Malcolm was the chair of the grants committee. So basically how with the Alpine Club and Montaigne climbing fund, Malcolm chaired the group that would then decide who got what grants to do with that. And one of the things that Malcolm was involved in with people like Tom Livingston and a couple of others was setting up the idea, or he was influential in setting up the idea of the Young Alpinists, which was a way through mentoring and a kind of semi-structured program of supporting young, very gifted and talented alpinists to become even better gifted and talented and safe alpinists in the greater ranges. So in a way, Malcolm had a little bit of involvement in that. and was very supportive of getting that off the ground. Hasn't had much over that since his stroke. But I'd like to think actually that that's one of the ways that probably Malcolm more than me has been influential in helping that next generation. Malcolm's also writing a book, writing his autobiography, which I think is going to be pretty neat, pretty good. And I'm a great believer in words and stories shaping and influencing things. So I hope and believe that when that book is published, that actually will be quite an important legacy. But you know, and part of your question is about how do you motivate and inspire. That hopefully will be something that will be there. And I actually think as well, Davey, you know, things like this are just a good way of just talking about stuff. And maybe people listening to this, maybe people reading a book, maybe people taking part in a Young Alpinist program might just become passionate about something, you know, and there might be a little bit, you know, but I it's almost that impossible thing about looking back to look forward. So when I was picked up by the wrong person back in when I was 15, God knows how child protection would deal with that now. But no, I was literally picked up by his bloke who said, "Oh, you going to this climbing? You going climbing?" Yeah, I think so. And I went off climbing rather than going to a climbing class, basically. I didn't know at that moment how that would shape. You know, I didn't know that when Ken Wilson asked Bert Jenkins, "Do you want to take some climbing? Can you produce some black and white photos, please, for this book?" How that would then influence my climbing career. And so almost we never know how those things we try and do to influence and shape will ever fall. And I think a lot of times they fall on deaf ears, but every once in a while, just maybe somewhere in there, if we can do things that help stand a chance of maybe influencing 1, 2, 3 people, however many, to be passionate or to learn or to take some learning from what we've done. Malcolm and I have always had this absolute belief. If ever we sit there and go, well, when I was a lad, and pat our big fat bellies, when I was a lad, what we used to just fucking shoot us, all right? Because that is not the way to do it. Well, you know, you can do it like that, but that's not the way. That project, that ability to influence is not by the telling people and rocking back on our fat-bellied heels, you know, is not the way to do it.
Well, like you mentioned earlier with parenthood, it's just the nudge and the guide and see where it'll take.
Hopefully.
Yeah, good.
Hopefully.
So you talked about your changing path for the future is rock climbing.
Yeah.
Or more focused on rock climbing.
Yeah.
Where's that going to take you? Is it going to be in the UK or is it going to be out west?
What day is today? What day are we on now? Sunday?
Sunday.
Yeah. So Tuesday I'm getting on a plane.
Okay.
Wednesday morning I'm going to Leonidio for a couple of weeks. So going out with my climbing partner Chris Pasteur and a bunch of folks and going sport clipping in warm Greece. Yes. So we'll just see where that goes.
Yeah.
You know,
long-term goals?
Long-term goals, be confident turning up and flashing 7As. That'd be cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
7As at 60, that'd be quite good. And just enjoying stuff in the mountain. I'm lucky because I do enjoy the mountains. And I enjoy Perth Climbing Wall, you know. And I enjoy the physicality of movement. And I enjoy running with Sarah. And I enjoy, you know, hearing Ed's stories when he's been out on Anachmore yesterday skiing, and I enjoy when Eleanor tells me about how she loved the bouldering, you know, in Edinburgh. And I think I count myself lucky to enjoy that, and if I can keep enjoying that, it doesn't really matter whether I'm sport climbing in warm Greece or if I'm, you know, trying to avoid the damp bits on Craig and Dulloch or, you know, whatever, you know, just climbing is just what I will always do in one way, shape or form. Yeah.
No, I think your passion definitely shows through when you talk about it. When I've met you before, it's certainly shone through, and it's great to see that you've still got that passion and you continue on. I look forward to see Malcolm at top of Helvellyn.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be good. You might be help carrying him down. He's only walking up. He's not carrying down.
Well, if I'm about, I'd definitely
it'd
be great to be involved in that.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Cheers,
It's been great, and I think it's been documenting this. I suppose your journey has been amazing, and sitting here listening to very inspiring stories.
Cool.
That's been Passing Outdoors. Thanks to Simon, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Let us know, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks a lot.